It's a story about a young guy named Tyson. Recently, he managed to become a famous chef. Very rich people from different countries and cities came to him to learn. But unfortunately, his bright life didn't last very long. One fine evening, a guy was returning home as usual. Due to extreme fatigue, he did not notice the red light of the traffic light and went out on the roadway. Just at that moment, on the road was a huge truck, which, to put it mildly, just blew away our hero, and at this point his life was cut short. Exactly 6 months before this case, Tyson began an active career growth. It is to him on the recommendations began to come to people from other cities. The restaurant in which he worked found just incredible popularity. Then the guy was the happiest on the planet. Nothing bad thought, with a smile on his face, cooked delicious food. Also that day the restaurant had a new menu, which Tyson personally created. The restaurant itself looked like this, and it was called Kusa. Here the guy works together with his sister Anna. The girl also puts out in full force, and does everything to attract as many customers as possible. Basically, she works as a waiter. Her main task is to be very polite and serve the food on time, and in cases if Tyson is a little behind on time, be sure to inform the customer about it. In terms of cooking, she also takes part, but it happens only in cases of extreme necessity. The reason for opening the place was a video that the guy posted on the net, and it became very popular. Even before the video was published, Tyson dreamed of opening his own place someday. He was never attracted to wage work. He always knew that he deserved more in this life. But I couldn't imagine that it would happen so soon, and things would go sharply uphill. Of course, I didn't have that much money on hand to open the place, so I had to ask my father for financial help. But luckily the restaurant became a success. My sister is helping, so everything is great. Because of the strong arrival of customers, they had to hire another waiter. His name was Tyler. He was also very young, but not as ambitious as his boss. In general, he worked without much enthusiasm, and the customers were not always delighted with him. In fact, after he was hired, things started to get a little rough. One day, when Tyler failed to adhere to basic sanitary norms for the umpteenth time, Anna couldn't stand it and decided to tell him what she thought about him in the staff room. Initially, the girl made a stern face and said she had an important conversation to have. Tyler, in turn, started to act like a very incompetent person. Instead of listening, he made up in his head that Anna was going to confess her love to him. Even when the girl started to say that it wasn't about that at all, he didn't plan to stop, but got up from the table and, as if he were a real macho man, pinned her against the wall. He probably thought Anna would enjoy it, but in reality she was already scared. At the very last moment, the girl shoved him off and yelled across the room that you can't work with your sleeves down because they get caught in the plate and get dirty with the food on the plates. She also added that she had no feelings for Tyler and was definitely not going to date him. At this point, the employee stood in complete incomprehension of the situation. He was really 100% sure that the girl wants a relationship with him, and in fact everything turned out quite wrong. For the fact that Anna allegedly made a fool of him, the guy got very angry, and promised himself that he would never forgive her for this. Also, to spoil the reputation, Michael and his sister, the new hired employee, took some photos, which show a clear violation of all sanitary norms, and put them on the network. Because the place is so popular, these photos quickly went viral. People were shocked, to put it mildly, and began refusing to come here to eat. Literally in an instant, the best establishment in town acquired a terrible status, with a lot of negative reviews. The guys tried to convince the visitors that the photos were actually fake, but despite this, the guests were becoming fewer and fewer. In the end, the problem could not be solved. People kept refusing to come, so there was nothing left but to close the restaurant. At the entrance, Tyson left a note thanking all the customers who came to them. It was the best time of his life. His sister was very depressed, and he blames only himself for everything that happened. Because of the constant stress, she even started to have health problems. Tyson, in turn, as a real man, tried to support her in every possible way, and said that she was not to blame for what happened, because in fact, it was all Tyler's doing. Tyson was very sorry that he took him to work. The reason for this was not only the closure of the business, but also the mental state of his sister. It was what tormented him most of all. Every day the girl ate less and less, and constant hunger strike has a very negative effect on the human body. As a result, she was put in the hospital. The doctors discovered a very serious illness and gave her a far from good prognosis. After only 6 months, the disease got the better of her, and Anna went into the next world. It was the worst 6 months of Tyson's life. All he had left was the memory of his sister supporting him in the idea of opening countries. She also burned with the idea, and brought incredible benefit in his development, helped just everywhere, and gave a good mood for the whole day. The night came and Tyson, completely depressed, went out for a walk to get his mind off things. His head was always looking down, because of which at the first crosswalk, he did not notice the red traffic light and fell under the wheels of that ill-fated truck, after the collision with which there was no chance of survival. As a result, Tyson, who was born on the same day with his sister Anna, 13 days after she went into the next world, also lost his life under the wheels of the truck. At least that's what was going to happen. After a while, the guy woke up lying on his bed, in a completely different time, in a different country, and in a different city. He didn't even know what was going on yet, when suddenly his father and sister burst into the room. They couldn't believe that the guy was finally awake. Tyson looked at them with huge eyes and tried to understand who they were. Then a screen appeared in front of him that only he could see, and it said that the guy had been reborn in a whole new world. This information only raised more questions. Tyson took his head, and began to assume that this is someone's evil joke, because such events are possible only in manga, to make sure that this is a completely new world, and the boy called his sister's name Anna. At least they had a very similar voice. But instead of responding, the girl gave him a very strange look and asked if he was okay. The father was also standing nearby, trying to figure out what was going on with his son. Tyson didn't even know how to react to any questions, because he didn't know anything about the past phases of this body. Suddenly the system offered to accept the experience of the past owner. By the way, Sis very began to worry, because her brother constantly looked at one point. From that moment it became clear to the guy that this screen will go out only him. Frankly speaking, Tyson did not understand what it means to adopt the experience, but still decided to agree. Then before his eyes began a short story about the life of a man who lived here before Tyson. This boy's name was Merrick. He was only 15 years old, lived with his father, a farmer named Patrick, and his little sister Maria. This is a fantasy world, because there is a dangerous dungeon, and a large number of different monsters. At one point, quite by accident, the kid ate a poisonous mushroom and lay unconscious, and then Tyson's soul was placed in his body. Patrick kept asking his son how he was feeling, because the mushroom was poisonous and anything could happen. Tyson laughed and said that everything was fine, but the parents in this situation were not laughing at all, because their son could lose his life. Sis was also just as worried about her brother, and was insanely happy. The kid is finally on the mend. It is true what they say that the love of a sister is one of the purest. You can't make them worry too much, because it could end badly. The boy still did not understand a lot of things, but nevertheless his new life had already begun. After only 1 month, Tyson was well integrated into the team, and was helping his father on the farm. The work was hard, under the strong sun, but there was nowhere to go. The good sister was always there, and every time she brought water, so that the boy could restore his water balance a little. Then Maria said she would go for a run in the woods, and if she took a bucket with her, she would probably pick berries from the forest. There is one problem that is very knocked out of the rut. It is the eternal lack of food. Since the family was quite poor, to eat more than they give is almost impossible, and sometimes it happens that there is no food at all. Work in such conditions becomes even more difficult. When it was lunchtime, the boys were gathered in the house, and their father was delayed for some reason. Maria was even a little nervous. When he came through the door, in a suspiciously good mood, Sis could finally breathe out and relax a little. Patrick brought a big bear with him, and proudly said, It's going to be a delicious lunch and dinner today. Tyson's happiness was unbounded, because he had already forgotten the last time he had eaten normally, and now the day had come. Turns out his father is a hunter, not as famous as some, but still. This information made Tyson a little wary, because in these parts everyone hunts exclusively monsters, and live on it. Such a profession is very dangerous, and any outing could be the last. But nevertheless today everything went well. Patrick asked his son to help him in cooking. This is a great opportunity for Tyson quite accidentally to show his culinary skills. In the process of cooking, the father immediately noticed that his son had become much better with a knife. In order to somehow avert suspicion, the boy said that it was not surprising, because he was practicing every day. Based on this situation, we can understand that Merrick didn't know how to cook. Patrick could cook quite well, and he was glad that his son had taken that gift from him, according to his father. It was in their genes, passed down from generation to generation. As far as we knew, unfortunately, she didn't survive childbirth. His father quickly brought him to his senses and told him to keep cooking, because everyone was already very hungry and there was nowhere else to go. In the end, the guys got the tastiest ingredients for the kebab, picking up spices to taste, roasting on the fire, and getting incredibly tasty meat. The family is poor, but after his father's hunt, there is sure to be a feast. Surely this is one of the most pleasant events in this place. At first Tyson did not go to eat, because he felt sorry for the animal that had to be destroyed. But then when he tasted the first bite, he changed his mind, because it is really very tasty. When everyone had eaten enough, Maria remembered one unique dessert that Patrick had prepared, dragon egg pudding. She would like to eat it after such a delicious kebab. In general, the new life began quite suddenly, but no matter how you look at it, Tyson also likes it very much. A friendly family, a friendly team, what could be better than that? However, one day, the happy days are over. His father once again went hunting, this time in the cold, harsh winter, and never came back. It had been a week since then, and they had worked so hard to clean up, and they truly believed that their father would return soon, even though the chance of that happening was getting slimmer and slimmer by the day. Not a day went by that Tyson didn't think of his new father. In such a short period of time they had become too close to each other. Where did you come from so far away? At least Maria kept a positive attitude and continued to bring water for her brother on time. Since her father was not home, the boy had to work twice as hard and faster in order to have time to work his part of the vegetable garden and his father's part. It had been a week already, but that was no reason to write my father off, because sometimes he went hunting for weeks at a time to gather more food than usual. But still, it felt like it had been an eternity this week, in case something happened to him. Maria suddenly feels sick and almost falls to the floor. The guy catches her in time and gently places her on the table. She is very dizzy. It must be the strong nerves. The thoughts of her father do not give her rest, but for now it all passes quickly and she can function normally. Tyson, for the umpteenth time, they strongly recommend her to rest, because you can't stress your body so much. It is fraught with serious health problems. In recent years, such cases occur more and more often. There are two main reasons for this. The first, nervous system cannot withstand, and the second, constant lack of food in the body. The energy is simply nowhere to come from. No doubt Tyson is a great cook, but if you look in the cupboard, you will realize that there are almost no ingredients. No matter how well you do not cook, but from the air food will not turn out. In any case, with this situation must somehow get out. If nothing to think of, then the sister at this rate long will not last long. Suddenly the boy remembers that huge monster that his father brought, his skin. For what purposes it was decided to leave. Literally 5 minutes of searching, and in one of the Sholyad Tyson finds neatly packed skin of the monster. You can say for the first time it is their salvation. To begin with, the guy brought it into small pieces, and threw it into boiling water, then added some vegetables, salt to taste, and the result was a healthy soup of monster skin and vegetables. Thanks to the fact that the skin is very rich, it gives the broth a delicious smell and flavor, and stewed vegetables fix it all. Maria was insanely happy when her brother offered her to try his masterpiece. The broth really turned out to be very tasty and useful. After the girl ate, she felt noticeably better. But if it still continues, the guys will be completely left without food. Continue to look for options to get out of this situation. There was no way to ask other families for food because they were as poor as everyone else in the neighborhood. In this case, there was only one option left. Before saying it, the boy asked his sister if she could stay home alone for a while. Without even waiting for an answer, the boy gets out of his seat and runs to the barn where he finds the sword. There is no more time to wait. It is necessary to go in search of his father, at least try to help him. The forest is a very dangerous place, and even a professional like Patrick one day can get into trouble. In addition to the sword, you need to bring medicine and cooking utensils for the journey. Tyson had to go through the whole barn to find everything he needed, and when he pointed at those items, everything around him turned bright blue. Turns out in his new life, the guy has an ability called inventory. He realized that because the name says it all, you can put anything in there. Tyson doesn't understand where this space is yet, but the most important thing is that it's convenient and makes life very easy. In the end, the guy looked like a typical novice hunter, green coat and sword at his side. Literally 5 minutes of rest, and the boy goes to the nearest forest. Previously his father taught him that in this forest there is a dungeon with monsters that are not so dangerous. For a novice hunter this is the best option to try himself in a new position and get food, which at home now in principle is not. Since his father went there quite often, Tyson suspected that he was there, just lost somewhere. But if it is not so, then the situation is much worse than it may seem at first glance. It remains only to believe in the best, and go on the planned route, with positive thoughts in his head. On the way, the boy realized how hungry he really was, but now it is by no means possible to eat what is on hand. It is better not to touch it at all and leave it for Maria. Now our traveler has only one question: if there is not something to eat around here. After walking just a few meters, he noticed a beehive lying on the floor, with a lot of honey. Since this is a fantasy forest, it's quite possible that it's some kind of trap, so to check it out he decided to poke it with a stick and see what happens. Well, apparently it's fine, and it really just fell from some tree because of the strong winds. The system immediately notified us that honey had been found, which is all very well, but it's almost impossible to eat it, and it's not advisable to eat a lot of sweets on an empty stomach. It is necessary to look around more carefully, if there is something else edible nearby. As suddenly not far from himself, Tyson heard strong screams and requests for help from some unknown person. Not thinking long, the boy jumps out of his seat and runs in the direction where these terrible screams were heard. Already on the spot he found some frightened young man sitting under a tree, and around him rounded the white wolf. Surely he was about to attack and finish off his victim. To be honest, Tyson's pretty freaked out, too, because this is his first run-in with the monster. The events were developing too fast. There was no time even to think. With each second the wolf began to growl more and more, and then at one moment pounced on a defenseless man, who in principle did not provide him absolutely no threat. Of course Tyson, as a real brave hunter, threw all his fear aside, and rushed to help, as suddenly at one moment the whole world stopped, and before him opened a window system. It informed the guy about the beginning of a new quest, the essence of which is to save a man who was attacked by a wolf. The guy didn't even know what it was, but since he was going to save this man, he decided to accept the quest. In the end, he left his sword, stood in front of the frightened guy, and drove away this wild monster, who was not interested in anything else but eating something. Tyson asked him to run away as soon as possible so as not to interfere with the fight, to which he kindly agreed. At the moment we are facing a level 5 monster wolf, a rather strong creature. The guy couldn't even think that his first opponent would be so strong. By the way, when he looked through the system after rebirth, he saw his level 2. The brazen wolf decided to attack first, and Tyson dodged the first attack without any problems. Of course, the monster didn't like such a turn of events, so he quickly turned around and immediately decided to attack a second time, but the last time in his life, Tyson was able to defeat his opponent with a dexterous movement of the sword, literally in a few minutes. He did not expect such a result from himself. It turned out to be much easier than he had originally thought. The wolf must have seemed too formidable, just because it was his first duel, and the guy had no idea what to expect from such an opponent. After all, a difference of 5 levels is a lot to take in. Then a notification came on the screen that a new skill called cooking had been opened. Then the frightened tourist, who was probably just lost here, finally ran out of the bushes. Tyson immediately apologized for pointing his sword at him, because it was an accident. The traveler's name is Charlie, and he was really surprised when he saw that the wolf had already been neutralized. Then when he came to his senses, he immediately thanked Tyson for his help. If not for him, it could have ended much worse, and so the guy did not get a single scratch. The system also notified him that the quest had been successfully completed. Charlie was a little frightened because his savior at one point was frozen in one spot, which was not quite normal. Tyson just couldn't get over the fact that he was the only one who could see the screen. At the same moment the bread and butter appear on the hunter's hands. Such a reward was specified for the task. The system works thoroughly. The rewards are given out almost instantly. As it turned out, Charlie works as a doctor in the city of Sophinia, and he often walks through these woods, but this situation happened to him for the first time. It was time to say goodbye, because the doctor was already late for work. Tyson told him to have a good day at work, and to be careful in the future. Since everything was all right, it was time to move on, to look for the dungeon his father had told him about. But before we do, it might be a good idea to grab a bite to eat. So there is bread and butter on hand. Eating it all just like that would not be the best solution. To make the food more nourishing and tasty, the guy made a fire, put a pan stand, then the pan itself, made sandwiches with butter, poured honey on top of them, and put them on the hot pan. Then the frying process begins. We wait for some time, and we get a delicious toast with honey and butter, which looks extremely appetizing. As practice shows, culinary skills will be useful in absolutely any conditions, even during hunting. All that remains is to wish you a good appetite and finally start eating. There is a long journey ahead, so you need to savor this moment as much as possible. As Tyson took his first bite, he realized 100% what a masterpiece he had just prepared. It's a combination of butter and honey, a little crunchy on the outside and soft bread on the inside. Just super. This kind of food is not even in all the others you can find, and in this case the guy thought of cooking it in the middle of the forest. Such moments you really realize how beautiful this life is, and how little we need to be happy. Suddenly a new notification pops up on the screen. The cooking skill has been successfully activated. For eating toast, the hunter received a positive effect. Attack power plus 2 units. It will last for 4 hours, in principle. As for toast with honey and butter, pretty good. I wonder what will happen if you eat meat. Tyson finally came to the realization that if he cooks more delicious food and eats more of it, he will become many times stronger. Basically, for this there is a cheat system to make life easier for its owner. Primitive quests with rewards while camping will speed up the process of becoming stronger. In this case, the guy tried to double his positive effect by cooking the dish again. But this time the system warned him that he could use the cooking skill again only after 4 hours. In that case, he decided to abstain. A bit of a shame, of course, but it's still great, as they say, better than nothing. As the meal was over, the guy started putting all the items back into his inventory. It was time to finally go to the dungeon, the very place for which the whole trip had been organized. Tyson knew where it was, so it was not hard to find it, and in a few minutes he was standing at the entrance to the cave. The only thing he wanted was to find his father, who hadn't been home for a week. Upon entering, the system immediately warned us that this is a dungeon in the forest. Its danger level is F. It probably means one of the lower levels, because my father told me that there are no strong monsters here. Since this is the first time we're going down into the cave, our hero's heart is pounding like never before. It's a very exciting moment indeed. The first thing that catches the eye is the bright light inside the cave. Any normal person would expect to find a solid darkness, since the world is fantasy, so the cave is also fantasy. Tyson was still extremely interested in where this light comes from, so he began to scrutinize the wall, but except for the usual stone, he did not notice anything else there. Tyson knew that he would be able to find his father quite quickly, but for now he had to go through this long cave corridor, which felt like it had no end. Everything was more or less calm, until Tyson met the first monster. It was a 6th-level boar, which, by the way, at first glance, looks less dangerous than a white wolf, but now we will find out how it will show itself in battle, and whether there is any difference between the 5th and 6th levels. Panicking, Tyson immediately grabbed his sword, and was ready to take the fight. Given the hunter's 10th level, and the impact of the positive effect, the fight should not be difficult, but never underestimate your opponent. Due to the sense of danger, the boar at one point began to behave more aggressively, but that doesn't make it any scarier. The fight hadn't even started yet, but the hunter was already imagining what tasty meat he would end up with, and what he could cook with it. Just at that moment, Tyson's appetite was whetted, so he didn't drag his feet and started to act. This time Tyson decided to attack first. The aggressive boar didn't even have time to move from his place, but the young hunter had already managed to deal with him. As a result, this fight ended even a little bit faster than the previous one. You can see that the guy started to feel a little bit more confident. Almost immediately after the victory, the winner received the coveted meat, which he had already dreamed about when he first saw his rival. On the background of much euphoria, the guy quickly hid the meat in the inventory, and decided to go deeper into the cave, because he felt somehow lonely. With boars he clearly had more fun. This time Tyson felt much more confident, so he held his sword firmly in his hands and began to deal with each one in turn. The issue was solved in no time. A whole bunch of destroyed could provide food for the family for a long time. There will be no problems with meat now. By the way, when it is in the inventory, it works like a refrigerator, and the meat does not spoil, a very convenient feature that will allow you to bring home everything you can. Food is good, but you can't find your father yet, so you'll have to move on. Suddenly the system sent a notification that the bonuses have expired. Wow, how time flies by. Has it really been 4 hours already? But on the other hand, it has its advantages. It is an occasion to cook delicious food with new ingredients once again. Tyson quickly set up a small kitchen and was ready to start cooking. He decided to wash the dishes in salt water first. After the last time, he decided to wash the meat in the same place. It's not known how hygienic it is. He's sure the master knows better. With the meat he repeated this procedure several times, then put it on a wooden board and began to dry it with a cloth. After such careful procedures, even the terrible boar smell went away a little, and when the meat begins to fry, it will generally acquire a very pleasant aroma. Now add some spices for a more pleasant taste, pull the meat on a wooden stick, and proceed to roast on the fire. The main thing to all these delicious smells, did not run away other animals that live in these areas, otherwise it will be a big problem. When the meat is sufficiently fried, we put it back on the wooden board, and begin to cut it into thin slices, then put it between the bread, and at the end we have a sandwich of boar meat, just an incredible culinary masterpiece, if you consider that it was cooked in a cave. Probably no hunter eats this good while working. We wish ourselves a pleasant appetite, and start tasting our freshly made sandwich. As expected, the taste is incredible, and it becomes especially delicious when you realize that you haven't eaten anything meat for a week. In general, our hero ate it for a good soul, to the last piece of bread, and when the meal was over, thanked this place for the opportunity to eat delicious meat. The next one was quite filling. I wondered how long it would take for the guy to get hungry again. After all, this snack was more filling than the previous one. A few minutes later, the system sends another notification informing me that Tyson has moved up to a new 11th level, which is quite a happy event, considering that I had to put a lot of effort into it. It turns out that by eating monsters, the hunter gains a lot of experience, so he can get a level up. Tyson wondered if his father and Maria didn't have the same thing he did. It's some kind of cheater ability that certain people get when they're newly reborn in this world. Well, now that the kids had enough to eat, we can move on. As Tyson wandered alone through the monster-infested cave, he was not shy at all, and shouted his father's name very loudly, hoping that someday he would answer him. But so far, instead of his father, he had only met a new monster. And he was approaching at a high speed. It was a monster bear, level 8, so far the strongest opponent that the guy had met before. Was extremely aggressive. Of course, it was even a little alarming. I wonder how big the difference between level 6 and 8 will be. The bear ran to attack first, and was afraid to strike with his paw, which has very sharp claws. With the help of his sword, Tyson managed to redirect the blow in the other direction. The only thing that was damaged was his bright green cloak. When the guy saw the bear lose his coordination, he made a quick and clear decision to attack. This attack was flawless, one precise strike to the opponent's vulnerable spot, immediately putting everything in place. Just a few minutes after the fight started, the monster falls unconscious to the ground. Nice clean work. The system immediately saw that rare bear meat had been obtained. Looking around, Tyson assumed he was at the deepest point of the dungeon, but his father was nowhere to be found. But where could he be? Could Patrick have gone somewhere else entirely that time? It's unlikely, because fathers are usually warned if they're going on a long journey. And then finally the guy remembered that he still has a sister, Masha, who has been sitting alone at home for quite a long time, and it is likely that she could have lost consciousness against the background of a strong head. Broth is certainly good, but constantly eating it is also impossible. Realizing this, Tyson immediately went home. A very angry Maria was waiting for him at the entrance, urgently wanting answers to all her questions. For example, such as where you were, why it took so long, and so on. Tyson was more afraid of his sister than of the first monster in the form of a white wolf. But in the end the girl just hugged him tightly and said that she was very worried, besides that she hadn't been alone at home for a long time, which is also pretty scary. She immediately apologized for her rudeness, and Tyson also apologized for missing too much time. Eventually I had to sit down at the table and explain everything to her. Maria was shocked to say the least when she found out that her young brother had gone down into the dungeon to try to find his father and get food, but unfortunately they couldn't find him. It was not even clear where he could have gone. Maria was madly happy about the return of her brother, but for her father she was worried no less, so even managed to get a little sad. To return her good mood, Tyson decided to talk about food, because it was already time for dinner. Now he will treat everything that he managed to find. But first, of course, the cheese meal has to be prepared, and as we all know, the guy's the best. So let's start cooking. First we take a wooden board, a sharp knife, and start slicing onions into thin slices, add carrots and meat, and send it all to the fire. At sunset this whole process looks especially beautiful. Also as we cook, do not forget to add tomatoes. Further, all this is a good stew. After a certain amount of time we begin to taste. If the taste we are completely satisfied, then everything is ready. Maria didn't even know how to react to it. She had no idea that today she would have such a delicious dinner. In the output we get stewed vegetables with meat. It looks very appetizing. The mood of her sister immediately noticeably raised. It cannot be happy, at least for a few moments. She will be able to get away from bad thoughts and a little relaxed. We wish the little girl a good appetite, and proceed to taste this culinary masterpiece. As it was to be expected, the girl liked it very much. She had not even had time to finish it, and she was already thanking her brother for the food. Tyson was insanely happy that his sister had finally cheered up. Honestly, looking at her, the boy often remembered his sister from his past life, and this time he told himself firmly that he would make his little sister the happiest on this planet, and in the future she will not need absolutely nothing. That will be his main mission. Meanwhile, in the city where Tyson previously lived, Tyler continued to live a full life. At the moment he was looking for a job, but wherever he went he was rejected. No one was not satisfied with this candidacy. After all, he was himself without education, and nothing of himself in this life. One such evening after another rejection, Tyler was walking back to his car. The only problem was he had a bad stomach ache and wanted to get home sooner. In order to make it to the bathroom, he had to break the rules of the road and exceed the speed limit. Of course, this kind of extreme travel can end badly, especially when the driver is not feeling well. His attentiveness on the road is at least halved. And here comes the first dangerous situation. A motorcyclist wanted to pass Tyler's car on the right side and overtook it. Because of poor attention on the road, the guy noticed it at the very last moment, and unfortunately did not have time to react. All this led to a terrible accident with terrible consequences. At a great speed he flew into a pillar, and then the car grabbed a huge flame. The naked eye is clear that the chances of getting out unharmed this situation is almost no. And just like that, this slippery kid's life was over. An accident set the stage. Tyler woke up in a completely different place, and at least different clothes. First thing he saw was some guy with green hair in an old-fashioned outfit. This man turned out to be not very good-natured, because the first thing he did instead of greeting me was to walk up and kick me right in the leg. Let's just say it wasn't the best good morning ever. The guy immediately asked indignantly why it was done. Can't you solve problems with language? At that moment, when he came to the realization that he is not exactly where he should be, because recently had a terrible accident, and this place is not even close to a hospital, it is more like a prison, where they keep the worst criminals. In the reflection, Tyler looked at himself for the first time since the accident. He couldn't believe his eyes. His appearance was completely different. How could he change, just in a few days? The warden's name was Jacob, and he really couldn't understand why he was surprised by his reflection in the water. Tyler's already starting to say out loud that it's not him, and he's slowly starting to freak out. To distract him somehow, Tyler told him that he picked the kid up on the street as a slave, and now he belonged to him completely, and just had to follow his orders. What the hell was he talking about? How could a man be called a slave at a time like this? What kind of country was this where such things were the norm? The warden's clothes looked like a fantasy world, so Tyler assumed it might be Europe, or more realistically, he'd been reborn in another world. Ironically, Tyson and Tyler were reborn in the same world. By the way, the guy had heard about such rebirths, and had already assumed that he must have some kind of cheater ability, and he could defeat his jailer in a second. He made his first mistake, and without even thoroughly examining himself, he attacked Jacob and tried to overpower him to get free, but as expected, he was quickly overpowered by the man's baton, and Tyler fell to the floor again with many minor injuries. Jacob sincerely couldn't understand why this guy was behaving so badly, because yesterday must have had a big impact on him. At this point, Tyler was really upset, if he was going to be a slave to his abilities for the rest of his life. In principle, everything turned out very fair. It is a direct punishment for the spoiled fate of two very talented people. Tyson in life was a good man, so when he lost his life fell into a loving, prosperous family. But Tyler, for all his deeds, in a new life became a slave who will work at best for food. It turns out that Jacob, also not quite prosperous, together with Tyler, they came to a luxurious house, in which stood Mrs. Veronica, all in a beautiful dress, very well-groomed and dressed girl. Jacob addressed her on you. Based on this we can assume that he serves her. The girl was extremely unhappy that she had to wait too long for the guys. The man apologized again for that, and told Tyler not to be silent either, and to apologize, because this woman is a potential buyer for the guy, and if he wants to get into her good hands, he should behave accordingly. After 5 minutes of examination, Veronica without much thought decided to take this boy for herself, because at least he looked good to her. Since money is not a problem in her family, she can afford to buy people, judging them only by their appearance. It's been a couple months since Tyler was bought by a girl from a very wealthy family. They had a house to match. The guy's main job on the property was to do whatever the owners wanted, like cleaning, tending to the garden, and responding to every call. Like right now, Tyler's been called and he has to come over right away. This time Veronica decided not to wait for him to show up, and came running. First, of course, she scolded him for taking too long to think, and then she told him what she wanted this time. There's a picture of a legendary fruit that can only be obtained through a monster. If Tyler really wants to be free, he has to get it for Veronica. It's certainly a strong argument, but how does he know how dangerous this monster is, and how to interact with it? Since the independent to become want more than to live, the guy not long thinking agreed to this adventure, and this evening went into the forest to search. To say it was scary, that's just not true. According to the information written on the piece of paper, the legendary monster is somewhere here. It's still unknown how true this is, but you'll have to explore the territory anyway. Tyler suddenly heard some kind of animal walking in the bushes. It was the first monster in his life, namely a white wolf, which was not very aggressive, but at least not happy with the presence of the guy. Anyway, Tyler drew his little sword, and was ready to take the fight if the wolf wanted to pounce on him. So he did, and since he was really low level, he just ran into the sword, which the guy put upwards. To be honest, he felt like a real hero after that, because it wasn't as difficult as he had originally imagined. He had already openly stated that he would be able to deal with the legendary monster quite quickly at this rate, even though he had no idea what it looked like. When he turned around, he saw a huge live tree that was clearly trying to attack him. How could a sword be used to fight a live tree? Could this be the monster Veronica sent her faithful servant to find? To put it mildly, the boy was not on a joke scared, and did not even try to take the fight. He immediately realized that alone to resist such a strong monster will not work. The best solution would be to just run away, and next time come back more prepared and preferably with someone else. The next day, Tyson decided to go through his father's things to find something useful for him. The first thing he found was armor that he had last used a long time ago. It was probably not even usable, because you could see how worn out it was. By the way, the sword, which I had to use quite often yesterday, had also fallen into disrepair, and was in a terrible state. At least it needed to be sharpened. It was not an easy task to bring all the weapons in the house to a more or less normal condition, so that they could be used. As Maria suddenly enters the room, she became extremely curious about what her brother is doing here, and why he needs his father's things at all. Tyson decided to tell her at once that he was going to become a real hunter in the near future. Of course, this information shocked her. But unfortunately, in these realities otherwise is simply impossible, because if you leave everything as it is, they will not last long. Food is the first thing that is necessary for a person. If there is not even it, then existence on this earth becomes simply impossible. It was a bitter truth that Maria just can't help but agree with. Father was the sole breadwinner in the family, and now for the period while he is gone, someone has to take over that position. Tyson, like a real man, made the decision to start working in his place. Sis was so reluctant to let her brother go alone that she decided to go hunting with him. But that's not going to happen. It's too dangerous, and Tyson said right away that he can't take her with him. Of course, it's all well and good, and at least one hunter in the family is necessary. But with such equipment will not last long, it is necessary to seriously think about it. This question is quite difficult, because there is no money at all, and where to get it to is still unclear. Suddenly Maria comes up with a brilliant idea: where to get money for a new outfit. From the last hunt Tyson brought quite a lot of meat. In principle, a certain part can be put on sale, and thus collect the necessary amount. In principle, this is a really good idea, and it has its place. Boar meat is quite popular on the market. All that remains is to figure out what the optimal price for it is, so that it is not too cheap, and it is inexpensive. By the way, my father also earned money. He managed to get not only food from hunting. When he looked in his inventory, he found out that there was also bear meat, so he should definitely go to the town. Maybe he could find his father there. Maria wanted to go with him, but Tyson didn't let her, because it was very dangerous outside the village. He wasn't an experienced hunter himself, and he had to look after his sister. In the end, thus the guy packed up and went to the city of Safania, to at least cut the situation. Speaking of which, it is the first time he goes to the city, and he knows the way only from his father's stories, so we can only hope that he is on the right path. Judging by Merrick's memories, he had gone there before with his father, but unfortunately for unknown purposes. As it turned out, There are even signs along the road that indicate the right way, which makes the task much easier, so in the trailer you cannot worry about the correctness of the route. About halfway through the journey, Tyson began to feel hungry, so he decided to stop and get something to eat. He knew that sooner or later it would be a forced stop, so when he was still at home, he cooked himself a delicious burger made of boar meat. We wish everyone a pleasant appetite, as is tradition, and proceed to the meal. Tyson managed it rather quickly, deciding not to even stretch the pleasure, in order to come to the city as soon as possible. When the snack was over, the guy thanked all the gods for the opportunity to eat. Then he drank some water, and felt completely satisfied. Now he was full of energy again, and ready to go on. A well-fed hunter is always better than a hungry hunter. It was not long before we reached our destination. We would rest a little, and then we would be on our way again. When suddenly, quite by chance, the guy heard someone moving in the bushes. He picked up his sharp sword and decided to check what was there. At first he did not see anyone, and even thought that he just heard it, but then the sound was covered again, and in the forest there are no coincidences. After looking around again, Tyson noticed a huge egg lying on the floor, the likes of which he had never seen before. Then in an instant, a bird flew by him at great speed and snatched the egg from his hands. She was quite serious, for surely this thing belonged to her. Apparently there will be some new discoveries all day today. Meet the bird-shaped monster, probably the same eggs that Maria told me about at one of the dinners. Apparently it's not going to attack, it's just guarding its eggs. What to do in such a situation, and suddenly they are very tasty, and for them you can get a lot of money on the market. Because Tyson has been standing in the same place for a long time, the monster gets angry, which is not surprising, because the guy is a potential threat. Tyson didn't expect her to be able to do that, but it happened. Because of the surprise effect, the guy was able to get back from her attack only at the last moment. It was quite dangerous, but if it dared to attack, Tyson had to do the same. So he drew his sword and this time he was ready to take the fight to it. This frenzied bird flew at breakneck speed. The human eye could not detect its movements, it could literally disappear. And then, as a rule, it was behind its victim's back, so that it was easier to attack. As Tyson is a clever boy, he immediately recognized its tactics, and again at the last moment managed to block the blow, this time with a sword. By the way this monster attacks with its beak, it turned out to be as strong as steel. After gaining sufficient height, the monster looks where exactly is his victim, and in a moment beak forward rapidly begins to fall down. It was only through the sound of the wind that Tyson realized that this time the monster was attacking from the sky, and it was a good time to move a little to the side, so that the bird didn't even have time to change its flight path a little. The monster's movements were too fast. This is the first time a guy really lacks the reaction time to make an attack. At the moment our hero is dealing with Monster Kiji. It's a 10th level monster. In case of victory you can get its meat, and it's not cheap. Anyway, Tyson is still one level higher, so he has every chance to win. He just needs to control himself and plan his attack properly. But apparently not this time. Tyson had a better idea. Today he is clearly not in the mood to risk his life, so he grabbed one egg from the nest, put it in his inventory, and started to run away as hard as he could. Basically it's a pretty wise decision, and better than nothing. Frankly speaking, even to run away was quite enough, because the rival has a phenomenal speed of movement, and especially fast running in the event that just out of his nest someone stole an egg. In general, the guy got into the most difficult case. We can only hope that by some miracle he will be able to escape unharmed. After a certain period of time, Tyson finally managed to break away. Most likely the monster decided to run far away, so as not to jeopardize the rest of the eggs. Well, it turns out the free egg managed to save. It cannot be happy. Now you can with a calm soul further move into the city. But before this young hunter decided to study in more detail what he stole, namely to cook something to cook. To realize this, the first thing we take out all the necessary items, such as a saucepan and a wooden board, then put an egg, and carefully break the shell. Slowly put the yolk in a bowl, so as not to damage it, take special sticks in our hands and start stirring. Add salt to taste, stir a little more, after the contents, together with oil stir into the frying pan, and carefully begin to fry. Since Tyson is a professional in this business, he cannot be careful. And in the end we end up with a delicious airy omelette made from kiji eggs. A unique dish that you can't wait to try. As the egg is not quite ordinary, the result was simply stunning. The omelette melted in the mouth and delighted the taste buds. In the obligatory order, the system notified that the skill of cooking was activated. For the eaten air omelette from the egg, a positive effect was imposed, dexterity plus 5 units, it will last for 2 hours. Then let's not waste a minute and check how it works. Now Tyson was moving faster than Kiji, and the guy remembered what he could get if he defeated this monster, namely meat, which is very expensive, and can bring a lot of positive effects. So he returned to the place, and once again decided to fight with this huge chicken. Now the most important thing is to concentrate as much as possible, and try to finish the fight in the shortest possible time. Since the mood was positive, it was sure to be a success. Tyler suddenly comes out from behind the bushes, then hides behind a tree again, and starts watching the whole scene. He was a little embarrassed by the fact that Tyson was yelling too much, but that wasn't the most important thing for now. First, he needed to see how he could handle this monster, and if everything went well, he could try to offer him cooperation. In the meantime, the guy had gathered all his strength, and this time he decided to attack first. And it was more than successful, literally one precise, quick strike, and such a serious monster as Kiji was destroyed without any problems. It was hard to believe what had just happened, a small positive effect that changed the situation so dramatically. So for this easy victory, the guy gets meat, and 5 more eggs. That's great news. I wonder how much it all costs, and what positive effects the meat can give. Meanwhile, Thaler realized that this candidate is pretty good, and may well be suitable to deal with the legendary monster. Meanwhile, Tyson couldn't wait to cook something. He had a whole bunch of imaginary dishes in his head, but he had to choose one. Tyler felt a little strange, as if he could feel something strange earlier in the day. Meanwhile, Tyler felt a strange sensation, as if he had seen this man before, but since it couldn't be so, he quickly let it go. But I decided to keep an eye on him anyway. Maybe he's not as good as he looks. After an hour, Tyson finally reached the city. It was definitely more fun than in the forgotten village, where people don't even know what they will eat tomorrow. City people live differently. I want to walk around a bit and see it in its entirety, but first I need to eat. Interest takes its toll. The guy went to the first grocery store and said that he wanted to sell something. He was met by a rather friendly salesman. But suddenly he began to behave strangely, and to ask various questions, such as "Are you new here?" and so on. Eventually the salesman said welcome, and asked what ingredients would be for sale. When the guy put these eggs and various kinds of meat on the table, the seller was speechless to say the least. Most of all, he was surprised by the eggs, which in these parts are considered a great rarity. The guy didn't understand what the problem was at first, so he decided to ask if everything was okay. The salesman was very interested in where a young kid like that could get them. When Tyson told him that he had defeated the owner of those eggs, he forgot his mother's name. He understands everything, but Kiji is not the kind of trash you can just take down and beat. He's an incredibly big figure in these parts. But anyway, the deal was done, and the seller handed over a bag of coins for the kid. A historic moment had just taken place. The first transaction in the little hunter's life had taken place. Since many hunters go to this town, the kid didn't lose the opportunity to ask if the seller knew a man named Patrick. As it turned out, almost everyone didn't know him, especially in this store, because he was considered a special customer. When he heard about it, the guy literally flew out of his seat and started climbing on the counter and asking more and more questions, but unfortunately the salesman didn't even know where he could be. And then the man asked what the big reaction was. Tyson decided not to hide the truth, but to tell it like it is. Anyway, a little over a week ago, Patrick went hunting, and he hasn't come back yet, so I'd like to know where he might have gone. It was a very touching story, But unfortunately, the man could not help, because he was not close friends with him, but just doing business. But the salesman now realized that this kid was his son. Tyson tried to hide the information in every possible way, but failed. In general, don't worry, a man like Patrick will never just disappear, he will definitely show up in the near future. This speech was inspiring. The boy really seemed to be charged with positive emotions, and began to believe in the best outcome. On this positive note, they ended the dialogue, and it was time to move on. On the way, the boy ran into some huge man, fully dressed in armor. This warrior pushed him himself, and began to stare. I wonder who it is in general. The guy stepped a little around the corner. The knight took off his helmet to show his face, and began to speak. By chance, the man heard that Tyson was Patrick's son. The young hunter confirmed it again, and the knight told him to follow him. And as a result, they came to a luxury store of uniforms. There was a large number of different weapons, armor, and everything that is necessary for quality hunting. The assortment was so large that Tyson's eyes literally began to run wild. It was the first time he had ever been in a real weapons store. But he wondered why the warrior had chosen to come here, because he was in close contact with his father. Since the man was silent, Tyson decided to start the conversation first and find out where the information that he was Patrick's son came from. The man told him that he had overheard the conversation. Then what did he want to talk about? He immediately urged the boy to calm down. There was no need for screaming and shouting. The man said at once that there would be no positive news, because he did not really know where his father had gone. But the last time they saw each other, Patrick said that he was going to go somewhere far away. Basically, no more details were given. Martin eventually decided to apologize for providing such worthless information. In any case, Tyson thanked even that, and said that it would definitely contribute to the search. Then he took out his little bag of money, and said that he wanted to see the armor and weapons. As a result, he came out of the store in a completely new, beautiful outfit, lacking only a helmet, but even so is already much better. By the way, even his old sword he also updated, now will not have to constantly carry it. Now Tyson became many times more like a professional hunter. Well, and of course there is one minus, absolutely all the money that was had to spend, but it's okay, it's a contribution to the future, so soon we will earn more. Now we can go hunting again. The people who were standing nearby were discussing the tragedy that happened recently. Tyson immediately went over to them and asked what happened. The peaceful people said that there was a monster in the area, which is raging and no one can calm it down. Basically, in just a few minutes, the quest has been successfully found. Now you need to successfully complete it. The main task is to defeat the monster. Reward for completed tasks: various ingredients such as herbs in the amount of 5 pieces, garlic 5 pieces, and potatoes also 5 pieces. You can't just leave it alone, people need to live in safety. Immediately the guy went to the road that is close to the city of Saphania. According to the stories of citizens, this monster lives somewhere here. The main thing to remember is that it appears suddenly, and scatters a 9 powder. When it takes effect, the body will stop moving, and the monster at this time slowly begin to take the lives of people. The poisonous powder sounds pretty terrifying. You should never let it get on your body, otherwise it's obviously the end. At the moment Tyson is just wandering along the road, hoping that sooner or later the monster will give away its location. It didn't take long for it to appear. It looked quite spectacular, this huge leap in height, and then a sharp landing. I wonder how the earth didn't collapse under him. In fact, it turned out to be a huge fly mushroom. It is clear how it has such an ability to emit a dangerous gas that leads to numbness of the body. This monster was 11th level, the reward for his destruction of the universal mushroom, which can be used for absolutely any purpose. Although the level is the same, but it looks very strong. We can only hope that our hero will find the right approach to this opponent, and in no way go under the influence of the poison. If you look at this monster's eyes, you'd think he's always dizzy, and this poison affects him a little differently. This self-confident grip decided to attack first, so he immediately swung and wanted to deliver the first blow.